When I was in elementary school, I was bullied, and so I've always felt like an outsider, the kind of the weird guy. And I guess I realized that when you grow up, that like weird guy is usually the one who will succeed with some things at least, because that weirdness is also what makes you see more opportunities, less obstacles. Like to me, it's like, oh, I can probably do that, and not afraid of just sticking my head out and just doing the things or follow my heart.
Welcome back to Through Their Stride, a Texas-born podcast sharing the stories of runners from here at home and far beyond. Today's guest is one of those far beyond guests, Kristian Warwick, an Oslo, Norway native and host of the Marathon podcast. Kristian is someone who brings a really unique perspective to endurance sports. He actually doesn't come from a running background. In fact, he was a competitive speed skater for a long time. And after stepping away from that sport, he didn't train in any capacity for a couple of years. Over time, he realized how much he missed the structure, the discipline, and the feeling that comes from committing to something hard. And that turning point came when someone close to him asked if he'd want to train for a marathon. That single question opened the door to an entirely new chapter. In 2023, Kristian found running for the first time and quickly fell in love with hard training again. That passion now extends far beyond his own goals. Through the Marathon podcast and the Marathon podcast sponsorship, he's become one of the most genuine people that I know when it comes to supporting other runners, creating opportunities, amplifying voices, and helping athletes chase things they may not think are possible. We covered a lot in this conversation, but we honestly ran out of time before we could get to everything, so consider this a part one because part two is coming very soon. And this is my conversation with Kristian Warwick. And so welcome to another episode of Through Their Stride. And today I am joined by someone who I've been looking up to for the past few months, Kristian Warwick, host of the Marathon podcast. And are you now at this point a 3 or 4-time marathoner?
Oh, good question. I am a 3-time marathoner. Yeah, three official marathons.
Awesome. And you've done the Boston Marathon. You qualified for Boston in your first race. And I feel like now I'm introducing you. So let me turn it over to you and kind of let you do a little bit of introduction of yourself. Who are you? Where you come from? And how'd you get into running?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I came into running quite late. I'm 33 years old now. And I used to be a speed skater, which is probably a sport that most Americans don't really have a relationship to. Like it's not the biggest sport, and I come from long track, so it's not the kind that you see with like several people on the ice on a hockey rink, but one of those 400-meter tracks. And so I was doing that I did that full time, honestly, for 12 years, I think it was. And then in 2023, my brother-in-law, he was running a marathon with the goal to qualify for Boston. And honestly, I had no relationship to the Boston Marathon. My fiance is from just outside Boston, which is where I'm at right now. But I still didn't really know what the Boston Marathon was. I didn't have a relationship to a marathon. Honestly, I've always been the kind of person who said that I'm never going to run a marathon. That just seems like asking for hip or knee injuries. And I'm not sure if I was wrong about the last part, but I definitely was wrong about never wanting to run one, because as soon as I started training and as soon as I, decided to do that, I kind of fell in love with it. And I'm sure partly also because I found that I probably was a pretty talented runner. It was exactly 4 months from deciding to do a marathon to that first marathon. And yes, I had been an athlete for most of my life, but then I've had about 2.5 years, I guess, of close to no training, especially no endurance training. It's just, I did 5K in the morning every now and then, jogging just to, and I was really happy about doing 5K. I was like, oh, that was a good workout or training. And so when I started training, and I had 4 months to do this, and with the goal of doing a 2:55 or faster, because that's kind of what we figured would be the cutoff time and the qualifying time that year in 2023. I had no idea what I was gonna do, or like how fast this was. And I remember specifically we were not too far from here, and I did my first kind of repeats, 10 by K, and I was like, wow, I'm now doing these repeats, and that is the average pace of what I have to do to run that marathon that we want to do. And I'm struggling to do 1K. And so I, in some ways, I'm very happy that we decided to have that goal before I had that workout, because I think that could have, discouraged me quite a lot. But then I just kept on running, and as with most people, I'm sure niggles came up, and I wasn't able to have what I would call a perfect build. But I tried to focus on just getting my miles, and I did not run more than 3 to 4 days a week, I'd say, because my body really couldn't handle doing more than that. I don't think I even averaged one threshold workout a week. And then fast forward to end of October 2023, or I guess I should mention first that I made one stupid decision in that block, which was to run a marathon in training 5 to 6 weeks before the marathon, just because I was like, I need to know if I'm good enough to do this.
Right.
And so I ran one, and obviously no official distance or anything like that. So just on my watch, and I stopped the watch when I got to the marathon distance on my watch, and I did a 2:56, I think. And then come race day, that was in Rhode Island, Narragansett, and I did a 2:52, and I placed second. And I think that is kind of what really sparked that. Oh my God, I love this. If I can do this within 4 months of, just training the way I had, and also like not really feeling the fittest. Like I knew that I'd done a decent job, but not feeling the fittest. Like that was, I was ready to do more, and qualified for Boston, and then obviously got injured just after the marathon because of an intensive marathon block, but still really fell in love with all of it. And yes, then I also started the marathon podcast about, I don't know, a year and a half after that or something like that, just because I love this community. So that's a long story, I guess. Like, I'm sorry it took some time, but that's me.
No, I think that's great. And you touched on a lot of things that I want to get into with this episode. But what you said about, it was a stupid decision to do a 26.2 mile practice run before the race. It's maybe like not conventional to do that before a race, but I don't think it's stupid, because I think it's, like you said, the 10 by 1K repeats, when you were able to do that at the pace that you were hoping for, and then you went and did this marathon practice, it's kind of that, it does give you that confidence of like, okay, I can do this. And especially with the adrenaline of a race, maybe I can do it a little faster when I'm in the corral and with all the people.
Exactly. Yeah. No, so I don't think it was. I'm not sure I'm against doing that. Like, because a lot of people will do a long run a few weeks before the marathon and all of that. But I think it really depends on what your foundation is, right? Like, because for me, who did 3 to 4 runs a week, I peaked at 90 kilometers. So like, what is that, 52 miles or something, that like, not 52, sorry, 56 probably, peak mileage. And then going out and doing a 26 mile hard run. Like, it wasn't, I did do it hard, right? Like, it was not progressive or anything like that. That part I think was stupid. If my mileage was like 120 miles a week, and I went out and did that and had more of a progressive run, it could have been a great build up to the marathon. But I think that also eventually led to that knee injury later on, just because my body wasn't ready to do 2 marathons in 6 weeks.
Yeah, for sure. And let's, since we're talking about the marathon itself, let's talk about your first marathon. I think everyone's got a first marathon story. Mine's pretty crazy. So I want to have you take us mile by mile, and what was that race like? How did you feel? And at the end, did you feel like you were adequately trained? How'd that all go?
Oh, it's a good question. I don't think I've gotten that before, so that's gonna be it will be fun, and I'll try to remember the important bits of this. So I remember that week leading up to it. I guess I didn't even say, I am Norwegian and we live in Norway. My fiance is from here, but we have a house in Norway, and so we traveled to the US. I think it was 10 days before the marathon or a week before the marathon, and my brother-in-law, who I was supposed to run the whole thing with, he got injured, so it was just me. But I had like this whole crew with me to that place to the race, because my fiance's family, they have a house not too far from the race. And I remember I felt so bad. Like, this was my first, I guess, meeting with the taper craziness of like really feeling bad. I thought I was getting sick. I was lying in bed. I was not in a good mood. I was not a fun person to be around, honestly. Like, my fiance, she's now like warning everyone around me. It's like, yeah, he's not fun to be around that last week before the marathon. Not a very good trait to have, but I guess I just have to accept it in some ways and be happy that I have a very understanding fiance. But yes, so honestly, maybe even the day before the marathon, I was like, I'm not sure if I'm gonna be at the start. And then the morning of, I started feeling better in some ways, as you do, and I got to that start, tried to kind of scope out like who is the competition here, what is the competition. Like I said, didn't really know, and I remember asking a couple of the guys at the start that I thought looked the fastest. It's like, what is your goal? What is your goal? And I might actually have just asked one of them, and he said that his goal was to run like a 240 or 245. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna let him go then. So there were 3 of us who started out a little bit faster than the others, and I let the other 2 go. And so it was kind of just me by myself. This is also not a big race. I think we were around, was it 200 who did the full distance.
Okay.
And yeah, started out, it felt pretty good. Immediately noticed that my pace was a bit faster than what I had done previously in training, but it felt really good. And I think this is also my benefit from, I had an advantage compared to a lot of other people coming from a sport where we used heart rate so much. So I knew exactly what my heart rate was supposed to be like. So instead of looking too much at the pace, I was just looking at my heart rate. Wow. And so for me, I just kind of told myself that I'm not gonna go above 166. And I knew that if I touched 167, that was okay, but then I would have to slow down, and I could like immediately feel that difference. And so I tried to stay there, did the first 10K in, what was it? Was it 38:30 or was it 39? I don't know. Like, it went pretty fast in the way where I was like, wow, this is much faster than I thought I would do. And then I caught up with this guy that, actually the one who said that his goal was to do this really fast one, the one I figured would just win the whole thing. So I caught up with him and realized that he could not have had a very good race, because I knew how I was racing. And then I had my fiance and her family. This is a course where you can actually just drive on the road. So you're running on the side of the road. They're shutting down these roads a little bit, or stopping cars like when it's necessary, but it's not like they're closing it off completely. So my fiance and her family, they were just driving with the car, and they would give me gels and provide me with water, everything I needed throughout the whole race. And so after that first 10K, I felt pretty good. And I guess, like, getting back to what we talked about with doing that marathon and training, I kind of knew what it was supposed to feel like. So I was okay, I feel pretty good. And I just kept it up. It was a very flat and even race, especially up until the first half marathon. And also at the half, I felt really good. I think I had 124 in the first half. And I started being like, oh, maybe I actually can do a 2:48, because that was what it was looking like halfway through there. And I was still just do my own race. I didn't see anyone around me. I was running all by myself. And I ended up doing that throughout the whole race. And so I had that same feeling, honestly, up until 30K. And then came a hill. It was a long hill. Yeah, so the thing was that the course was you ran one way and then you turned around, and you didn't run the entire race like on the same. So the course wasn't like you ran the same road the whole way back, but parts of it. And then when I got to around 30K, there was like this long hill, maybe a kilometer long. And I made the most stupid mistake ever, fueling in that hill. So I was like taking a gel and water, and that was when I needed my oxygen the most. And so I kind of just messed up my rhythm and all of it. And it was really, really hard getting to the top of the hill. And I had to just work on trying to get back. And so that almost bothers me to this day, because just felt like such a perfect race. And then I was able to mess that up. But yeah, I think like just with I think everyone who's ever done a marathon, they will know that when you hit 30K, you don't really know what's going to happen regardless. And so for me, I was just pushing through. It was really hard. I was not able to negative split at all. Like, it was a positive split. But we did get to a point where the half marathoners, we met up with them, and they were running a different course or something like that. And I didn't know if the person who was in charge of telling us where to go, I think it was a police officer, and I'm not sure if he knew that I was coming from the marathon distance, because I was the only one running there. And so I didn't trust that what he said was the right thing. So I stopped and I ran back, and I was like, are we going this way? And then luckily my brother-in-law, he was running, or he was on the bike next to me, and so he checked and he was like, no, Kristian, we're going this is the right way. And so I did lose some seconds there, and then I kept on running, and last 2K, which just like I barely remember that, but crossing that finish line and seeing 2:52 and feeling pretty sure that, okay, now Boston is realistic, like I should be good enough for that. And then also placing second, that was kind of surreal, and a very, very good feeling. Probably one of the best feelings I've ever had, honestly. So that was not mile by mile, but at least like that's what it was like.
Yeah, that's a fantastic summary. I love it, because a lot of runners, I think, can relate to a lot of things that you said in there. You know, when you hit that hill and you took the gel and the hydration, I've definitely had moments where I've been taking fuel when I'm like trying to get my breathing under control, and it's just like, you know,
exactly.
Like,
yeah.
What am I gonna do? And
no, you can mess it up so bad, and I think that is like we talk a lot about fueling enough and stuff, but also fueling at the right places. Like, I'm sure we'll touch on Boston at some point in this conversation, but that's the same that, like, if you fuel in those hills, that's not gonna really help you. And so you need to fuel, but you need to time it. Running,
in my opinion, it's such a rhythmic sport. It's just like music. Like, if you get out of rhythm in running, just like you get out of rhythm, it's gonna ruin the whole song, and it's probably gonna make you pretty upset as well.
Yeah, and I think that's what you're saying there. I think that it's something that everyone should remember, because even on an easy run, you can feel it or you can see it on your watch that you're like, okay, I have a rhythm now. It doesn't feel hard at all. And then you have a certain pace. And then something might happen, whether it's your focus or you stopping and then starting again, and you're not getting it back into that same rhythm. And then you feel like you're running just as fast or putting just as much into it, but the pace is slower. And that's something that I think is like really worth focusing enough on, also on the easy runs, and bring that with you into race day, and that will give you a better feeling, like you said, and try to just keep that, especially when you get tired. That's going to be harder.
For sure. All right. Now I wanted to also go back a little bit to your beginnings. And so you came from Norway. Your dad was an Olympic speed skater, and you joined speed skating when you were younger, and got to be pretty good at it. So do you want to take us through a little bit of your childhood and your growing up?
Yeah, so you're right. I grew up with a dad who's a two-time Olympian, and he got to compete at home soil actually when we had the Olympics in Norway in '94. And I remember early on, like when I have these memories from when I must have been just 2 years old, right? Joining him in the gym and on the ice at times, and just having a lot of fun with that. But I never really, like, up until I was 9 years old, I guess, I didn't really think of myself as a speed skater. I didn't have that much of a relationship. It was something that my dad did, but not something that I ever thought or knew that I would do myself. I did, from a very young age, start saying that I wanted to do the same thing as my dad. So there's this huge cycling race or bike race in Norway where you ride from actually the city that I grew up in to Oslo, the capital, which is it's 500 kilometers, whatever that is in miles. People can look it up. I'm not that good with those conversions yet, but I remember I was telling him that I wanted to do the same thing because he did that at 13, and so I wanted to do the same. And no one does that at 13. Like, it's I think you have to be 17 or 18 to do it, but we're gonna find a loophole somehow. Anyways, I wanted to do a lot of the same things as my dad, and then one day I think he was watching it was during that season where the U.S. had the Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City in 2002. And I was watching that with my dad, and I was like, okay, I really want to start doing this. And I usually say that it wasn't really hard to find a way down to the track when I wanted to. But my dad really never pushed me or my brother to start doing that. That was not... He always said that he didn't really want us to, because he didn't want us to feel that pressure or anything like that. But I fell in love with it. And I mean, then I was 9 years old. I was just a kid, so it wasn't like serious, or I wasn't like an athlete back then going all in. I was still playing soccer. I was doing other things. But then when I was 15, I remember telling him, and then I had a like fairly good season, and I remember telling him that I want to be the best skater in the world. I don't care how much it takes. Will you just make me a training plan? And he was like, yeah, I don't really want to be your coach, but I'm going to give it 2 years. I'm going to help you out. And we started out, and I had like a crazy amount of progress. I was doing pretty well. And within a couple of years, I also was like top 10 in Norway as a junior. Yeah. And we were training a lot. Like I think I peaked at 35 hours a week at 17. Wow. So that was a lot, and I really enjoyed it. I loved that life and the goals, and so yeah, I got to represent Norway as a junior. I'm still really proud of that. Although like I never really reached those goals that I had set for myself of becoming an Olympian and world champion and all of that. But I kept at it until I was 26, 27, until I kind of realized that I'm not getting anywhere here. I've been putting in a lot of effort. I'm not getting the results that I want. And So I quit in December of 2020. That was my last race. And it's been honestly much harder than I think people can imagine, quitting that sport, just because it meant a lot to me. A lot of my friends were doing it, and like when I'm getting married, my two best men, they're both Olympians, one of them Olympic champion, right? Like it's kind of seeing your friends going and not going yourself. It's really hard. I'm obviously super happy for them, but it sometimes felt like, oh, really wish that I was there and we shared some of those dreams together. So that has been hard, but I think that is also why running means so much to me, that I've found something where I can improve and I can chase new dreams, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And one of the things that you just talked about, like, oh, I really wish I was out there training and performing with them. I think I sometimes find myself just even in running where I'm like, I wish I was a better athlete. I wish I was a better, but you've so far built such a great community of runners. You've built a strong base for yourself as an athlete. So, can you talk a little bit about that? A little bit about how sometimes there's the urge to play the comparison game, but how do you stay grounded in that and just kind of take a look and be like, oh, actually, I've built a lot?
That's a very good question, and I'm not sure if I've mastered that myself. I think that it's hard. Like, so now I'm a 2:47 marathon. I did that in September, and after that 2:52 marathon, that first marathon that I did, I was really happy, really proud. And this was also like throughout those 4 months, I had started kind of connecting more with some runners on social media, and I saw people like Eric Floberg, running very fast times. And so I very quickly went from, oh, I'm so proud of this 2:52 marathon, to being like, this is not as good as as it should be, like 2:52. Okay, that's decent. But I very quickly went from, oh, it's not that good, which is like, when you think of it, and now I'm not talking about myself, it's just like 2:52, like a sub-3 marathon, or running a marathon in the first place. Like, it's good. It's impressive. So you have to kind of try to remind yourself that. But then I think like the athletic part of me is very much like, or the athlete in me, I guess, like, is very much like, well, that's not good enough. Like, cause I want to be even faster. I want to be better. And so, I remember struggling a little bit with that after that first marathon, and I've been struggling with that after my 2:47 marathon, because I was like, I had the same feeling. 2:47, great, that is really good. But then I got to a point where I was like, well, 2:47, it's not that much faster than the 2:52 that I did 2 years ago. So I haven't really had that much progress, I'm still really working on what you're asking me of, like, okay, I have to keep telling myself that. And then there are obviously other aspects of this as well. Like, you have running on one side, and for me, coming from a sport where I felt like I failed, I really wish that I did better. And then wanting to do so much more. After I didn't mention that, but like, I have a film and photography business that is kind of like, that's how I make my salary. Like, that's my living. And I built that to something that is much bigger than I ever thought it would be. I have the running where I'm running faster than I probably ever thought I would. And to most people, if I'm at a party, people are still just like, what? Are you serious? You did that fast of a marathon? And I now built a podcast since March 2025 where there are thousands of listeners every week, right? Like, it all sounds so good on paper, but I'm still struggling sometimes to take that in and look at that from the outside and be like, okay, that's good job.
Yeah.
And I think that that is also part of why I'm able to build some of the things that I've built. I think that's the reason why I'm getting out there running when I don't want to go out, because I am always hungry for more. So yeah, there are definitely pros to feeling like that, but I also think that I should be better at appreciating where I am and appreciating where I'm at. So the other day, I just got to 100 episodes of the Marathon podcast, and I made this recap of 2025 with a lot of guests that I've had on, and I went out for a run and I was listening to that. And very narcissistic, right? Listening to my own podcast, but
I do it too,
I was
so
like,
I get it.
okay, good. No, I had this feeling throughout that run. I was like, you know what? I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of what I've been able to build here. 100 episodes from end of March to end of December, and so many cool guests, people that I've connected with, and yeah, then I've been more able to just be like, okay, give yourself some credit. This is good. You've done well. And then it's kind of work in progress to. I would be a hypocrite if I sat here and said that I've figured this out and I'm just doing this and that. I don't have the answer to it, but I think that for everyone, and that is one thing that I appreciate about the marathon distance in the first place, is that we're able to compete with ourselves. We're able to compare our times with ourselves. So like whether it's your easy pace all of a sudden being, 7:30 per mile instead of 7:40, that's great. Or 10 minutes instead of 10:30, whatever. But it's just those small things that we can compare ourselves with, because with a lot of other sports, you won't get that. You will get much more of like, oh, you only see the results, and that's all you can compare with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think the comparison game, it's so easy to get into, and I find myself getting into it as well. Back in 2024 was my third ever marathon, and that was in Dallas Marathon, and I wanted to break 4 hours. I was like, I feel like I'm well trained. I'm hitting like really good times and shorter distances, and I'm gonna break 4. And my mom came with me, and like my mom's been a huge part of my running journey. And I was like, man, I'm going to do this in front of my mom, and it's going to be at the race that she qualified for Boston in. It's going to be great. And, mile 17, I found myself crashing and, barely hobbled into the finish line. And I think I did it 4:17 and some change, and which was a massive PR for me at the time. And the next morning, I was like beating myself up. I was like, I didn't fuel right here. I ran way too fast here. I should have done a little bit more studying of the course because I didn't understand the bridges and everything, And my dad called me at that moment, and he was like, "How are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm okay." And he was like, "What's wrong?" And I told him like how I was like processing, and he was like, "Well, it's really easy to get into that processing of you didn't do enough, and that you can stick with that for months." And
Yeah.
it's going to eat you up. But just maybe take a second to think about the fact that you just hit a huge personal best in front of someone who like means a lot to you. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And so that,
Yeah.
and
Go,
after that,
Dad.
I'm hungry now for more, but I am satisfied with what I accomplished. So
Yeah. No, your dad is right. I think it's such an important thing to remember. And I also feel like there's so much more to it than that time. And it's easy for me to sit here and say that now, because I know that come marathon, like the next race that I'm doing, I'm gonna focus on that, and I will be disappointed or happy based on like how it goes. But
yeah,
this last like week or two, especially over the holidays, like I was in the UK for Christmas, and there were so many of those days where I was like, oh, I don't really want to go out. People are hanging out by the house. They're having Christmas breakfast, and we're doing this and that. and I still had to go out for my runs. And first of all, it makes it much easier. I am now coached, so it makes it easier because I'm committed to a coach and I feel like I have to do it. But I'm so proud of myself for getting out there on those days where it takes me like 30 to 40 minutes to get from like putting on my clothes to actually getting out there, and then realizing when I'm out there, oh, this is not too bad, like it's okay, and then getting back and feeling so good, and I know that I put in the work that I was supposed to, and so in some ways I think that is just as much a part of that journey as the result itself. The result is obviously a consequence of all the hard work you put in, but there are so many things that can affect that day of the race, not just the time that you actually ran.
Right.
I'm just gonna adjust my light here. I see that I'm very dark for you.
Yeah, no worries.
I think that's better.
Yes, that's much better. Is it cloudy there where you are?
It was just a bit unpredictable right now. It's like it was a snowstorm this morning, and then it got sunny, and now it's just a bit cloudy, and now the sun is coming in again. So it's gonna be a bit back and forth. But now at least it's a bit more stable, I think. So
yeah, no worries. I'm actually kind of jealous of you guys are up in the Northeast getting some snow, because here in Texas it's like 75 degrees and sunny all day. So.
Wow. Well, for my track workout this morning, I wish that was the case. We're going into the New Balance track tomorrow in Boston because it's an indoor track. So we go in there tomorrow to get the track workout in, and just did an easy run instead today.
Yeah. Well, now I'm even more jealous because that sounds incredible. But
yeah, that will be fun. That will be fun.
Yeah. So I want to talk about Boston, but I also, before I get to Boston, because I feel like you started the marathon podcast just before the Boston Marathon. So before I get to Boston, let's talk a little bit about why you wanted to start the marathon podcast, and what was your motivation behind that after being a filmmaker, after being a photographer. What made you want to jump into the podcast realm?
And so everything that I feel like my whole life is just filled of random things happening and random ideas that I have. But when I started the podcast was I had been sick for 2 weeks, I think. And so I was a bit bored. My fiance went on a cabin trip, and I was like, oh, well, I'm just going to make a podcast. And I remember I made it with the goal of having guests on, but I didn't know anyone in the running community. Like, remember, I'm based in Norway. Like, Norwegians are much more, we're closed in a lot of ways. Like, it's not so easy to, like, I feel like here, if I went for a run, if I went to a track here, like tomorrow when we're going to that track, I'm sure I'm going to connect with some people. I might get some new friends just because you're running. Like, Americans are much more open in that way. Mm-hmm. Norwegians are not so much like that. So I didn't really have anyone. I had obviously friends from other things, but I didn't have a network within the running community. But I started it. It was just a random episode where I was talking about my journey, kind of the things you and I have talked about up until now, and talked about what I wanted the marathon podcast to be like. And part of the idea behind the marathon podcast was that I realized that there wasn't a podcast called the Marathon Podcast, and I felt like that was pretty basic. Like, if I started running, I might look up Marathon Podcast too. Yeah, online. So I was like, oh, okay, that's an opportunity. And started that. Had a couple of episodes. One where I was talking about my journey, a little bit about the Boston Marathon and things that I knew about that. Obviously, I'd never run it before, so I was just talking about things that I had heard. And then got my first guest on, which was a Norwegian triathlete that I know, and kind of built it from there. Started getting some guests on, and Yeah, it kind of just, you and I talked about this before, but it's so funny when you start a podcast because you barely have any listeners in the beginning, right? Like
Yeah.
that is always how it's gonna be, and that also makes it a bit harder to get other guests on, both in terms of the confidence that you have when asking
Yes.
guests to come on, but also just it's like people haven't heard about that podcast. And that's definitely still the case. It's not like the Marathon Podcast is the biggest running podcast out there, but it's a big difference between back then and what it's like now.
Yeah.
And so in the beginning, it was more like, okay, this is a fun project that I have. I have kind of like nothing to lose, and it was one episode a week. And then it started after the Boston Marathon. It had nothing to do with the Boston Marathon, but just like I started getting some guests on that were bigger names and started gaining more attention within the running community. And fast forward to now, it's like thousands of listeners every week. And yeah, I've been able to connect with people like like and that's probably the one thing that I realized that I appreciate the most. It's like, it's super nice to see the numbers. Yes, I love that. I'm not gonna lie, but connecting with people like yourself, and I would I would call it friendships, right? Like
For sure.
you become friends, and you have real conversations with people, and that is pretty unique and pretty cool to have, right? Like all of a sudden from Norway, I'm able to have friends all over the world, and if I go to Texas, I'm gonna hit you up. It's kind of like that. That's where things have changed the most, and I didn't ever think in 2000 and no, sorry, in March when I started this that I would partner up with Strava, that I would like have the opportunities that I have now going forward. And I'm very curious to see what this year will bring for the podcast, because my goal is definitely to have enough listeners and enough partners to make that my main thing, and not have to say yes to everything in terms of the film and photography side of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I think one of the coolest things about your podcast, and I guess about any podcast, but yours specifically, just because I think you're very genuine with your guests, you're very honest with them. You've built like this community. It seems like this community of runners, from elite athletes to coaches to running influencers and just people who have great stories. Do you feel like that's always been kind of natural for you to build friendships and build relationships in that way?
That's a good question. No, I've always found relationships really hard.
Okay.
When I was in elementary school, I was bullied, and so I've always felt like an outsider, the kind of the weird guy. And I guess I realized that when you grow up, that like weird guy is usually the one who will succeed with some things, at least, because that weirdness is also what makes you see more opportunities, less obstacles. Like it's
Yeah.
to me, it's like, oh, I can probably do that, and not afraid of just sticking my head out and just doing the things or follow my heart. But I've always found it hard. I can be very honest about that. Like when I'm in a room or in relationship with people, I'm like, oh, people probably think that I'm annoying. People probably think that I'm too much. All of that,
Yeah.
and so maybe that is also why I appreciate the podcast so much, because I've never once felt like that. I've always been with the podcast. I feel like I'm able to make other people shine. Like that is
Oh, yeah.
something that I'm really enjoying about the podcast. I'm having guests on. I'm trying to talk as little as possible. It's more like asking questions and making them hopefully look good and feel good, and also make other people see them for who they are. So that is something that I really appreciate about the podcast. But I have always also realized, like you said, that those relationships, they are really important to me. And I've always wanted those relationships, if that makes sense. And I guess like looking back, I've always been able to build some relationships to one degree, to some degree, but not as much as I wanted to. And so the podcast is kind of, it's a cliche to say, but I feel like it's almost like that is what I was meant to do. So yes, with the filmmaking and photography, cool, but the podcast is where I'm able to use all of the things, my skills, like my whole skill set is kind of just channeled throughout the podcast, I would say.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think that's true. Just hearing your guests and hearing your stories and your episodes, you ask great questions, you keep the light on them, and it's something that I think all great podcasters and journalists do. I mean, that's one of the reasons I started my podcast, is because I came from a journalism background, and I had wanted to find a way to marry my running, my passion of running, and my passion of storytelling. And I feel like this has been able to give me that for the past few months, and I think that's been really great. And for you, I was going to ask, with hosting a podcast, you are telling someone, hey, trust me with your story. Like, I want you to trust me with your story. And some of these people you don't even know, you've never met, they don't know you. But when they say yes, it's them saying, I think this person will do a great job in broadcasting my story. But for you, I know for me that it sometimes is a lot of pressure. It's like, oh, I've got to do a good job here. Do you feel that pressure when going in, and how do you handle that?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think that might have been something that I focused even more on when I first started asking guests to come on. It's pretty crazy. I mean, the running community is big, but it's also not that big. So I think that as soon as you get to a point where you have a certain amount of followers, people will start, like, that has been the biggest shock. And it's still really weird to me because over the last month or two, I've had big names on where they are like, oh yeah, I'm listening to your podcast. Like I was talking to Jake Baraklov the other day, like ran to Japan, not on the podcast, but we were just chatting. And I was like, this guy doesn't know who I am at all. And he was like, hey mate, I've been listening to all your episodes lately. Good job.
Like the best feeling.
It's pretty cool. It's crazy. But that is where I think that that changes everything, right? Because then you get to a point where when I reach out to them, I don't necessarily have to tell them, or I don't have to build a relationship to make them understand what the podcast is about, or how I'm gonna frame, like, or how I'm gonna build a conversation or the story. So that is like, I'm gonna answer this in two parts, I guess, because that's where I'm at now, where enough people or runners are listening to have either heard about it or listened to the episodes themselves. That will make it easier. Because it's like, if you and I have already listened to a podcast, we know exactly what to expect. Yeah. So like if we were to use Life in Stride as an example here, they were a big motivation for me to start a podcast, I would say. I'm not sure if I thought about it that way back then, but I'm like looking back, I think that they were, because that was the podcast I was listening to a lot. And if I or you, like if we were on their podcast, we know exactly what it would be like. We know that it would be a mix of just banter, a lot of BS in a lot of ways, like, which is great, like in a way where it just makes it so easy to, I think, be yourself and feel very relaxed. But they will also ask you serious questions about your training and your story. So if there's a deep story there, they will also focus on that. And then we know. If you weren't aware of that, it might be harder to understand, because like, oh, I'm going into a serious podcast, I need to make sure I answer everything correctly. And then it might be a shock that they're going to ask you what your favorite ice cream is. Like, so I think that by listening to podcasts, people will know that's kind of a part of clarifying the expectations. But back when I first started, that was really hard, right? Like, and I don't know if I ever thought about it as, it's a very good question what you're asking of trusting me with their stories. I'm not sure if I ever thought of it as trusting me in that way. It was more like, or I guess like trusting me more with their brand and their name, because you would have runners like Rory Linkletter, who is such a big name, and he probably has a lot of invites to interviews or to podcasts, and here I am, a small podcast which he's never heard about, and he doesn't know who I am or anything like that, and he still says yes. And I vividly remember being like, please don't ask me how many streams I have per week, because I had 50 streams per week when Rory came on.
Yeah.
And it would have just been so embarrassing, because it's like, okay, yeah, today you're going to talk to 50 people. I'm stealing an hour of your time and you're talking to 50 people.
Mhm.
But then the best feedback that I can get, and I've luckily gotten that from quite a lot of them, is like, yeah, you ask questions that not a lot of other people have asked me before, or I really felt like this was a genuine conversation, not an interview. And that is something that I think is great, and that's where my confidence comes in. Like, I know I don't prepare for my conversations. I'm just having a conversation rather than an interview. So then I just trust my ability to keep the conversation going. My fiance, she was like, "It's perfect. You get to talk for a living. You talk all the time." So it's kind of like, yeah. So I think that is. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question like specifically, but I think that is like, those are at least the reflections that I've made myself after these 7 months of doing it.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And you had brought up the Rory Linkletter story. I think you brought it up on the 100th episode of your podcast, when you were saying that when you got him on, you, like you said, only had 50 listeners. And it was like, he's probably not going to want to come on. And then he said yes, and it was a good conversation. And when you saw those numbers at that time in your early days, where it was like 50, maybe 30, maybe, did that make you ever want to quit? And then obviously you didn't quit, because you have been successful and it continues to go. But what made you not quit in that moment, if you had that moment?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and I was thinking about it the other day. I really wish that I took more screenshots of the stats back then, and I also wish that I talked more about it or made some notes, because now I don't really remember what it was like. I think I just knew, and that is also a little bit based on experience. Like, when building my own company, I knew that it would take time. I know that it's not like I'm gonna have success overnight. And I also didn't feel like it took that much time, because I had one episode a week back then. Now I have 3, but back then it was one episode a week, and I had to focus so much, kind of like with running. You have to focus on the next workout or the next run. And that was it for me. That I remember in the beginning, I had a lot of male runners on. And so I was like, I really need to get some female runners, like some girls on.
I had that exact thought when I first started.
Exactly. And I don't know if you face the same problem, but I reached out to girls, but I couldn't get an answer. And whether that is because the girls are getting more messages, or if I'm immediately put into like a creepy man reaching out on the Instagram, whatever it is, I don't know. But I was really struggling with that. And so I think that part of it is actually just that I focus so much on the tasks. Like, my dad always preached, focus on tasks rather than results. And I think that's what I did. I was observing the results or the numbers, but I was focusing more on who do I want on next. So it's like, okay, I got Jess McLean on. Cool. That's awesome. Like, that is nice. And then that was a big win. And then luckily for me, and I'm not sure if that is something that will happen all the time, I did have like a steady progress. So like, the numbers did go up, but just not a lot. It wasn't like I had went from 50 to 1,000 within within a few days or weeks. But there were definitely some names, and some of those names really surprised me. They weren't the names that I thought would. Like I have had names on where I'm like, this is gonna really just make the podcast blow up. And it's like, oh, nothing really happened. And then I had some people where I was like, this is going to be a great conversation. I'm having a great conversation. I wish more people would listen to this because this is probably not going to reach that many. And then you just see the numbers blowing up. Like, that is something that I think that probably based on experience, but also because of me being very stubborn as a person, I was just like, well, it's going to grow. I believe in this. This is going to work. And also based on a bit of the feedback from the guests that I was doing something right. And it's a cliche, but trusting the process, I guess that is kind of the key word here.
Yeah. Well, I think runners can always talk about how what we learn in running translates to what we do in everything else in life. And one of the biggest things is that consistency compounds. Like if you continue to be consistent at what you're wanting to do, you continue to set goals for yourself, like you said, and don't think about the big picture. Well, the end goal all the time, the end of like, I'm not where I want to be, so I'm bad at this. That's not necessarily true. You're not where you want to be because you just started, or like you're only a quarter of the way into your journey. But think about where you've come from, and keep building and keep stacking the bricks. And that's what I think people of all walks of life can take away from this story is, you're somebody who builds things, and you start maybe with very, very little, but you're very curious about what it could be. And you're like, okay, I'm going to keep working at this. I'm going to keep my head down and keep working. And then you're there, I mean, it's amazing to see.
But I also think that there's a part of this where, so part of my personality is that I get obsessed with the things that I do, and I get obsessed with, I'm so competitive. Like I'm not gonna hide the fact that I will compete with everyone when it comes to the like. I love Life in Stride. I talk about them on my own podcast. I will give them shout outs everywhere, but I will always compete with them. Like when they are talking about their numbers, I will be like, okay, what are my numbers compared to that? Like I'm not able to not do that. No. And so I think that part is that I will start looking at those small things, like what can I do better than others, and not always like comparing myself with others in terms of like I want to do this one better than them, but it's just like I want to be good at all of this. So I want to make reels for every podcast episode, get it out there, and have people collaborate with that because I know that is how it grows. I also remember being like, because I've listened to podcasts for, I don't know, 10 years probably. And we have this very popular running podcast in Norway. And I remember I was like, oh, I wish they asked that question. Like I really need the answer to that question. They asked questions and then they got answers, but they didn't really ask that last question that I really would have wanted to actually know. Like if I was asking you about a workout and you were telling me, oh yeah, I do this and that, but you didn't really tell me what intensity we were doing it at, then that workout would be worthless to me. Because if you were going all out or you were doing like low threshold, like I would need that information. And so that was also part of the motivation that I had. I was like, I want to keep on asking these questions that I would ask regardless, or that I would want the answers to. Mm-hmm. And it could definitely be that my listeners are like, oh, I wish he asked that too. But I hope, like, my goal was always to be that podcast where I'm answering all your questions, or I'm having the guest asking or answering all that questions. So, yeah.
Well, I think what a good podcaster does, and I think you do it, Life in Stride does it. One of my favorite podcasts is The Drop from Believe in the Run. And what all of y'all do is you feel like you make the listener feel like they're in the room with you guys. You know, it feels
Yeah.
like I am sitting there and like listening and kind of engaging. Sometimes I've even find myself listening to a podcast and they'll say something that I really agree with, and I'll like respond, and I'm like,
I
oh, you're in
love
the room, but
that.
I'm like running on my run and saying things out loud. I was like, if somebody walks by me, they probably think I'm crazy right now, but I think that's a
All of a sudden on the road, like, yeah, I agree with that.
yeah, oh yeah, for sure, or like and then
That's
just like
amazing. Yeah.
so, but I that's what I love about your podcast and the ones that you've mentioned. And is that kind of a goal of yours as well, to kind of make the audience feel like they're there, to bring them in? And what are some tips and tricks that, I don't want you to give away all of your secrets, but like, what are some tips and tricks that you do to bring people in?
Well, first of all, I'm an open book on that. I'm very competitive, but I also don't believe in hiding things or not promoting others, if that makes sense. Because I believe that if you like my podcast, you'll listen to my podcast. If you don't like it, then you won't listen. And it doesn't really matter if there are other podcasts out there. It's just, we'll all just supplement each other.
Well,
But it's a good question what you're asking, because I'm not sure if I love hearing that that's how you feel. I don't think I ever thought about that in the same way. I guess my main goal, and that's what I'm telling all the guests before the conversations as well, just like I feel with our conversation now, it's so casual. It could be that you have some questions lined up and that you prepared for that, but I don't feel like you are. I feel
yeah,
like we're just talking and the conversation is taking a turn, and then you're asking me a question, and that is more based on what we just talked about rather than just a set of questions. And that is what I'm always aiming at, keeping it to that very casual conversation so people listening feel more like I guess it's easier to feel like they're in the room when it's a casual conversation rather than a set of interviews. So if I asked you a question and you said something about like, oh yeah, and then my knee really started hurting. And then I was like, okay, so the next marathon that you did, how was that? Like I in my head, if you told me that then your knee really started hurting, I would say, how is your knee today? Or what did you do to get back from that knee injury? Just because I want to ask that follow-up question. And that is not something that I've really thought about. It's more that I would rather ask you more about that knee situation than getting to that 10th question if I had 10 questions, if that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah.
Okay, so
No, I'm kidding.
I love that. That's amazing. No, but that is I think that the best podcasters probably have questions lined up. Like
Yes.
I do think that they do, and they're prepared very well. But the better you are prepared with those questions, first of all, you don't have to be too tied to them, but also if that is a sheet of questions that you had, then I would say that you're doing an excellent job, because I don't feel like you have that, right? Like, and that is, I would say that is our job as hosts, to
Yes.
be able to communicate in a way where it doesn't feel like this is just 15 questions that
Yeah.
the guest is going to answer.
No, I think my wife actually told me today, she was like, prepare a list of questions. And I was like, ugh. Like, I was like, that's something that for me makes things feel robotic, and I want it to
Yeah,
feel natural. But she said, well, but they're questions you can fall back on. So
exactly.
if you want to continue to keep the story going and keep the conversation going, and you run into a lull, you don't have to, because you've got questions. But it also gives you the ability to actually listen to the guest and hear what they're having to say, because it's a high likelihood they may answer the question in another question that you wrote
Yeah,
while you're asking a question. You know what I mean? And I feel like
yeah,
I feel like you've done that today, and that's why I've been able to kind of jump around, because I'm like,
yeah.
yeah, and then ask some follow-up questions based on So credit to my wife for giving me that idea.
Yeah. Good wife.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
feel like good wives, good fiancés make us who we are. So
Oh, definitely. It's so important. I think that's like that's the secret to all of it, honestly. Like whatever question you're asking me and I'm answering something, I probably could have said like, well, it's my fiance's support, whether
yeah,
it's the running or the podcast, it means a lot. So yeah.
awesome. Well, I want to ask one more podcast question, and then I want to move on to Boston and in your
Mm-hmm.
training. Um, One of the things that I love about what you've done with your podcast and what you've done with your, I say podcast and your brand presence, you are very genuine. You are honest. You ask honest and real questions. And you have obviously the Marathon Podcast sponsorship, which has been insane in 2025 and very helpful for runners. But for me, in my personal experience, you answered a question of mine when I messaged you months ago. And not only did you answer it, you said, hey, can we just jump on a call? It would be easier if I just talked to you and gave you some, answers in face to face. And for me, I was like, no way. Like somebody that I really look up to is wanting to talk to me on the phone and give me actual advice. And that's something that I think comes out in your brand and in your podcast. People can see how real you are, how honest you are. Is that a goal of yours to keep it authentic? And do you think about that as you record and as you create content?
That's a good question. I very much believe in being authentic. Like I want what you I want to, whether it's you or anyone else, like if you listen to the podcast and you hear my voice or hear how I sound, I want you to feel the exact same way if you meet me. That is not to say that I'm like always as positive and enthusiastic. Like I definitely have bad days and I've had my struggles as well. But I think that my dad had a nonprofit organization, or my parents. My mom was very much a big part of that, and my parents have like their whole lives, I would say, worked to make the world a better place.
Awesome.
And in some ways, I would say that having a filmmaking and photography business and just making money, if you can call it that, it doesn't really feel like I'm contributing to a better world in some ways. And so now that I have a voice, and I'm totally aware of the fact that this is not the biggest podcast in the world or anything like that, but I'm still able to reach a lot of people. And then I guess I want to be that positive voice. Like I want to have an impact in that way. But I also think that, just to touch on when you and I first connected, I was like genuinely excited about that. Like I think it was fun. I think it was fun that you reached out. And I remember writing to you, do you want to jump on a call? And I was like, please let him just say yes to jumping on one now, because I'm excited about this.
Yeah.
I think that most people will be, I think that is also why people come on the podcast. They like to talk about what they've been able to do and share that in some ways, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're curious about what I've done, and especially when I feel like I'm at the beginning of building this, it's a huge compliment to me that you're asking me for that advice or that help.
Yeah.
And so that is something that I think that, at least for me, I'm genuinely excited about it. And so, yes, to your question, I am authentic, but I'm not sure if I'm thinking that much about it. I think it comes back to what I said. I'm a weirdo. Like I like doing these things. There are so many things about this that I'm just very passionate about. And then it feels very natural. It feels like it comes very natural to me to be that person. And if it comes off as very authentic, I'm very happy about that. Yeah. But I'm not sure if you can force being authentic either. I think that you either are or you're not.
Yeah.
But I also, like, people can, if people have time at some point, they can head over to my YouTube and watch the Boston Marathon documentary that I made. And there's like a story about my anxiety and the running. And I think that like that, if you hear me on a podcast or in a lot of my videos, or on social media, it might look like everything is perfect, but it never is, right? Like, we both know that there are things in our lives that will be challenging. Some things might be a constant. Some things will not. But I just think that you're still authentic. It's just that you're showing that one side of it. And then I'm not sure if it would help you or me if I was just showing you if I had a really bad day. Like, then I would rather use the podcast to channel that energy if I had a bad day, if you know what I mean. I don't know if I answered your question, but
No, yeah.
I felt
think you
like
did.
just messing around there. But
Yeah. Well, I think the plus, or I guess the benefit of being genuine and authentic and being a good person, I feel like the good that you give into the world will come back to you tenfold. And whether that is a religious thing or whether that's just common sense, if you're just nice to somebody, they'll be nice back, and I feel like that's what you do, and it's helped you, but you'd help so many people, and that has benefited you because it's made you as successful as you are. And I think just nothing bad comes out of kindness,
No, that I think you're right about that, and I think that's one thing. I remember I was talking to my dad a few years ago, because when you grow up and when you move out of your parents' house, right, like there will be some values that you bring with you, and there will be some values that you create of your own. So like, if you say you have 10 values that your parents gave you, you might choose to use 3 or 4 of them, or maybe more. But I remember I told my dad that there are so many things that you guys have taught me and things that I will bring with me, but the one thing that will always be a constant will be kindness, like being kind to other people. And I'm very grateful to them for that. And like you said, I think that is the one thing that will always, even if you don't get anything in return, in terms of like, if I'm nice to you and you were mean back to me, like, it would still benefit me to be kind. I would never regret being kind, I think.
Yeah, because at the very least, you probably touched that person's life, even if they're mean to you. They will think about it at some point, and so you put some good into the world. So
exactly, yeah.
Well, my wife just got back, and we are going to have to go soon. But I do want to ask you a little bit about your training, and then maybe we can do a part 2, because I have so many more questions that I'd love to ask.
Definitely.
Yeah. So you are now training with Jonathan Green. That's been a big thing for you, a big help in your training, it sounds like. But all of your marathons prior to this were self-coached, and you ran the Boston Marathon self-coached. So at first, I wanted to jump a little bit about the Boston Marathon prep. So coaching that yourself to Boston, what was that like? Did you feel a little lost, or do you feel like you kind of had a set in your head of like, I'm an experienced athlete, I know how to train for something, I've got this?
Yeah, I love being self-coached, and I think that I love now being coached by John, and I think that I'm really benefiting from that. But I also think that if I was self-coached, I still would have been able to find my way somehow. But I do think now looking back and like looking at where I'm at right now, I think that I will have more progress going forward with John than I would have had without him.
Yeah.
But for Boston, I had a knee injury just after that first marathon. So it was like a year and a half between that first marathon where I qualified for Boston and the actual Boston Marathon, because I did my first Boston this spring, or last spring. And I was struggling a lot with the injuries, so I did not have a perfect build at all. Honestly, I feel like I was just getting through that build. And when I got to Boston, I was like, I haven't been running. Like, honestly, it was just like, I did I think I like average between 27 and 30 miles a week the last 3 months before Boston. And
Yeah.
so I was like, I'm not prepared for this. But for some reason, when I did my last like hard long run before Boston, which was 2.5 weeks out, I did pretty well. And I was like, oh, wow, this is much better than I thought it would be. And then come Boston, I did a 2:53, which is just behind my PR. And I remember before the race, I was like, if I can do a sub-3 marathon in Boston, that would be great.
Yeah.
So yeah, the Boston build, not perfect at all. And then did that next build where I did 2:47 in my home city in September. Then I really felt like I was doing everything right. I felt like I was able to build my mileage. My body responded very well. And I feel like I knew exactly what I was doing. And then fast forward to now, because now it's been a month and a half, I guess, of like properly training with John. And it's really nice. Like I said, committing to someone in that program, and also seeing the way he's adjusting the training and everything. It's been really nice, and I'm a better runner now than I've ever been, I think, and very curious to see what 2026 will be like. I have a lot of marathons this year, so it will be very interesting. But we do have Boston as kind of the main goal, and the goal there is to run a 2:38. So we'll see what happens there. Yeah.
I think you got 2:38 in you. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of your workouts and your paces on Strava, and I'm like, you're killing it. So I think 2:38's in the cards.
Thanks. Yeah, I honestly do feel like that myself too. And I'm not I'm not afraid of putting those goals out there and saying it. Like now, if I can keep on running, just have consistency in my running going forward, I think 2:38 I might even have to move that goal a little bit to a faster goal. We'll see.
That's awesome. Well, Kristian, I gotta unfortunately run, but
no, you're good. This is fun.
We have to do a part 2 because
let's do a part 2. I'm more than down for that. Yeah.
Awesome. Maybe we record it next week or something like that, but that'd be great.
Sounds perfect.
Awesome.
Thank you so much again for having me on, and I'm very excited to follow your journey as well, and very happy that we connected.
Definitely. Same here. And thank you so much. I hope you have a happy new year and a great little vacation with your fiance in Boston.
Right back at you. Thank you.
And that was part 1 of my conversation with Kristian Warwick. I hope you enjoyed it. Kristian's been such a big mentor of mine for the last few months. It has been a really big help in helping me launch this podcast. So it was great to have him on and share this story. If you liked this story and are excited for part 2, stick around because it's probably going to be released next week. And if you liked this, please give it a review, please share it with a friend, and please follow or subscribe wherever you listen. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.